Welcome to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. We're applying the mind of Christ to the matters of the day so that you can connect the eternal with the everyday and get ready to head out into the world that God so loves in ways that honor Jesus. So let's get started. This is The Reconnect.
Encouraging you to live as an ambassador of God's kingdom in the world.
This is The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms out wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Well, again, happy Thursday to you. Thanks for listening to The Reconnect. Without Carmen, I'm Paul. Carmen will be back in on Monday. You know, she likes to spend the time in the start of our second hour kind of looking at the news headlines because it's stuff that we need to pray through. We need to be part of, asking God to work in the world that His kingdom comes in the midst of the problems of this world, and just talking about some of those issues. The U.S. House yesterday passing a measure directing the president to end the war with Iran or get approval from Congress. Now, that vote was a 215 to 208 narrow victory with 4 Republicans joining the Democrats. Now, this resolution, just so you know, is largely symbolic, though there is a similar measure in the Senate that would compel the president to end the war if passed. The House vote came hours after Kuwait authorities blamed Iran for some deadly drone and missile attacks on their airport. 1 person was killed, at least 63 wounded, officials say. Separately, in Washington, negotiations for Israel and Lebanon, for negotiators from Israel and Lebanon, they agreed to a ceasefire conditional on Hezbollah halting its attacks on Israel and retreating above the Litani River. It's unclear if the militant group will abide by the terms. It has continued to fire missiles and drone attacks against Israeli forces as well as into Israeli territory. Lebanon has been struggling to rein in the Iran-backed group in the past. As a matter of fact, if you go back to our Tuesday Reconnect, we had a chance to talk with Luke Moon from Two Hammers and Generation Zion, and he said, the Lebanese Christians and Sunni leaders largely want Hezbollah, one of Iran's proxy groups, out of the country, but it's been a struggle. If you want to know more, again, I point you to our conversation on Tuesday in the first hour with Luke Moon. Also in the Middle East, flights resumed yesterday in Kuwait after their airport, like I mentioned, was attacked. The drone strikes there. It caused significant damage to the international airport's main terminal, leading to the temporary closure. Kuwait's foreign minister says it summoned Iran's top envoy and expelled 2 lower-ranking diplomats in response to the airport attack. Also, yesterday, Iran attacked Bahrain, which is home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet, but the Iranian missiles were intercepted there. U.S. struck back at some targets, again testing this fragile ceasefire. A different bit of news, and this out of Washington, thanks to our friends from World News Group. Detransition advocate Chloe Koh petitioned lawmakers to outlaw sex procedures on minors while testifying before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. Doctors prey on vulnerable children to perform sex experimental procedures, Chloe said. Cole said. Cole told senators how she started receiving treatments that altered her sexual characteristics at the age of 12, even undergoing a double mastectomy at 15. She testified that doctors can't tell her if she'll ever be able to have children. She still struggles with PTSD, waking nightmares, and feeling emotionally numb. Plus, she described waking up each morning to pain in her hips and knees due to her physical development being interrupted by the transgender treatments. She also described suffering long-term harassment from LGBT groups for detransitioning, as she did. She said that harassment targeted both herself and her extended family. Hundreds of activists were calling for Chloe's murder a few weeks before her testimony when she was going to speak on a college campus, Chloe testified. Speaking on that issue about LGBT, Gallup put out a recent report, and after 2 decades of rising support for LGBT issues, the U.S.'s attitude has plateaued and has begun to pull back modestly. Approval for same-sex marriage, that is, as well as the moral acceptability of gay and lesbian relations, and endorsements for transgender changes are all down from peaks in the early 2020s. 65% of Americans still favor legalized same-sex marriage, but that's down 6% from its peak in 2022. Similarly, the percentage of viewing gays and lesbian relations as morally acceptable also has dropped from a 2022 high. And the share of Americans who consider changing one's gender morally acceptable, especially when it comes to minors, that has declined another 8 points down to only 38%. Okay, how about a little bit of lighter news? I guess we finally have the answer to the question, who let the dogs out? The NHL. It's time for the NHL's Stanley Pup. It's the dog competition featuring adoptable rescue dogs. That's returning on June 8th for its third consecutive year to bring a dose of puppy power to the Stanley Cup Finals. NHL's content and events president, Steve Mayer, says this event has quickly become a fan favorite tradition, blending the competitive spirit of the NFL, or NHL that is, with the mission of finding homes for animals in need. I wonder, as has been the case this week, Ryan Mitchell, who's part of the Champion Unlike Any Other podcast, unlike any other podcast, is here. That's a sports podcast, and do you think you'll be able to get an interview with the winner of the Stanley Pup?
Are they following Jesus? Do they have a story? Are they going to point people to Christ?
That's
then
true.
We can talk.
Then we can talk.
Yeah.
That's what I'm glad you brought that up. I love the fact that that's the focus of your show. And again, if people would like to listen to the Champion Unlike Any Other podcast, you can find it at myfaithradio.com or really wherever you get your podcast. Let's look at some other statistics. According to the latest U.S. Census data from 2020, roughly 46% of U.S. adults are categorized as single or unmarried. Now, that's a huge shift from the 1960 census when singles were less than 30% of the adult population. On top of that, the median age for people to first get married is like 31 for men, 28 for women. Here's the bottom line. You likely know a lot of single, divorced, and widowed people. How good are you at loving your single family members, and neighbors, and friends? How well does your church do at loving the singles and singles in their midst? Doug Hankins, who is he's a pastor at First Baptist Winter Park, Florida, and he's the author of Still Single, Still Called. He's going to join us in 90 seconds here on The Reconnect on Faith Radio. Again, this is the Thursday, The Reconnect without Carmen. I'm Paul, and recently I've been working through my family tree. It's something that I wanted my kids to know about. I want to pass that on to them. And as I've been going through a lot of the data, thanks to one of my cousins getting this, I'm all the way back now to my great times 7 grandfather, Francois Perrault. He was born in 1617, going way back. Now, there's still a lot of gaps in the data. I'm also trying to fill in a lot about my great aunts, great uncles, all that stuff. But I found, the ones I found thus far, especially going back into the 1800s, I had quite a few single aunts and uncles. They never married. Singleness, it's not a modern issue as we kind of think it is, because we talk about the issue, the crisis of singleness. It's been part of our history for a long time. Doug Hankins is joining us. He's the author of a new book called Still Single, Still Called, a guide for Christian singles and those who love them. Hey, Doug, thanks for joining us on The Reconnect.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm just about ready to turn 60 this year, Doug. And in some ways, for those of us born in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, as I was reading your book, we grew up in a statistical blip when it came to singleness in our culture. Can you help explain that and give us some context?
Well, you certainly sound younger than 60
Well,
on
thank
radio.
you. That's very nice. That's nice of you to say. Give him extra points,
man, whatever
there.
your healthcare routine is, you're doing a great job. Yeah, you're right. You grew up in a statistical blip, and we still need more data on that. But as long as the U.S. has been tracking data, we know that in the 1900 decennial census, singles accounted for 39% of the population. That number drops to about 29% of the population in 1960. And then 60 years later, it's almost 50% of the population. And so it leaves statisticians asking the questions, what gives? And part of that is that the U.S. made a concerted effort to prioritize marriages, families, and home purchasing, really in the post-war era, through a number of policy measures and societal emphases. And what happens is that people who were born in your era, in 60s, 70s, 80s, grow up in a world where it seems like everybody is married, and that the institutions that are being constructed are built around the idea of families and home and raising children. And there's the sort of ideal American dream of the family who owns a home, white picket fence, 2.3 children, Rover is in the backyard. And that was sort of a goal that everybody was aspiring to in that time period. But what data has shown is that since the countercultural revolutions in the 60s, with the rise of the economy in the 80s and the strong Reagan era years therein, and then the 90s and some of the countercultural things that have happened there, there has been a rising level of singleness, and it leaves statisticians and pastors and everybody else to ask, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know. And I think what my book's trying to do is just bring some levity to the conversation, especially for Christians, which are my chief audience, just to keep in mind, just for perspective, that Jesus, who we have all asked into our heart as Lord and Savior, was single all of his life, well into his 30s, and he seemed to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And so singleness doesn't have to be a problem. It is something to consider if you're a pastor, if you're a ministry leader. It's something to consider, but it's not necessarily a problem. And that really what I think people are looking for is the problem of loneliness. Sorry, I think you're going to say something.
Well, you were just hitting on it. Problem. You're hitting on problem, and I wanted you to set the stage for us, really, looking at the history, because, we have this baggage because we grew up in this era. Many of us grew up in the era where, marriedness was so common, singleness was less. And we have this added onto it, this, you can call it the Jerry Maguire syndrome. You complete me line, right?
Right.
We look at singles as incomplete. I look at my great aunt Marguerite. I told you I was going through my family history. Now, my great aunt Marguerite, I knew her, and she died at 102. Never married. She was single all her life. But she was one of the most vibrant, engaging people I knew in my family. She had a full life. She also stayed connected. But again, what is missing in our equation when we look at singleness instead of looking at it as a problem?
That's a great question. I think, again, when you are doing missions to America, we'll just use that term. If America is your mission field, there has been a cultural value of getting married, in part because the way that sociologists talk about maturing and growing up in terms of human flourishing, there are 5 milestones that humans typically go through. They complete their schooling, they enter the workforce and become financially independent. They get married, they purchase a house, they have kids. Those are sort of the 5 big milestones for growing into adulthood as we understand it. And if you've achieved those milestones, you certainly are going to typically become a more stable, pro-social member of society. You're going to own property. You're going to stay there. You're going to not be transient. It's going to allow a community to flourish. It's going to allow institutions to be built. There are all these really positive things going on. And when America was set up for that in a little bit better way, especially in the post-World War II era, that all kind of fit like hand in glove. But I think you're right to point out that not everybody has always adopted this path, and that's okay. Your Aunt Marguerite, for example. Henrietta Mears, another Minnesotan who moved to Los Angeles and was at Hollywood Press and was the kids director there for many years, single lady all of her life. So we've sort of created this narrative that says marriage is the norm, and oh yeah, there are single people too, and we'll make room for that. But that should probably be sort of minor, because normal, healthy human beings want to get married and have kids. And let me just say this, there is some truth to that. I don't know that I would cast it in terms of normal, healthy human beings, but I think in general, there's sort of a self-evident emphasis on, hey, I think I'd like to have this kind of community. But I think what we've done is made singleness sort of an exception to the rule. And what we're confronted with right now is singleness is not an exception to the rule. It is itself a rule nowadays. A rule. Married people make up 50%, single people make up 50%. Part of this is the high divorce rate. Part of this is the high cohabitation rate in America. And so we don't really mean single if you're sort of living with your, girlfriend for years and years and years. But for all intents and purposes, what I think it's saying is marriage is no longer the default. When you enter into a conversation and you have some kind of assumed connectivity or relationality, part of that assumed connectivity can't be that we're both married. It's got to be something else, right? And I think for a while, Christianity is in churches has sort of stood on the shoulders of marriage to kind of create an assumed commonality. And I don't think that's true anymore. And that's okay. There's a way forward. And that's what my book talks about.
Yes, and that's where we want to go next, because what is that commonality that we need to bring about and really build, well, our churches, yes, the rest of our relationships on as well, as much as we can, especially within the faith community. We're talking with Doug Hankins of First Baptist Winter Park, Florida, who, just for the record, you are married.
I am. Happily married. 22 years on Friday.
Oh, hey, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So
I think we'll make it.
We'll make it good. Well, as we continue the conversation, let's talk about that commonality and hopefully hear some stories about some churches that get this. That's coming up next here on The Reconnect on Faith Radio.
Just take the first step. Just take the first step. I mean, every journey begins with a first step, right? And if you want to hike to the top of a mountain, or if you just want to, make it around the block, it all starts with a first step. Just take one step, a step out the door. Now, the same holds true in the journey of discipleship with Jesus. A relationship with Jesus actually begins with a first step. Sometimes taking that first step can be really hard, right? Well, if you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, just take the first step. Text the word faith to 41224. Our friends at the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association are going to hold your hand as you take the first step or the next step in your walk of faith with Jesus. They're going to help you walk with him and talk with him. Take the first step of faith today. Text the word faith to 41224.
Okay, we all have reasons for hanging around with certain people, certain affinity groups. Maybe you're into, baseball, and you hang around people at baseball games or play baseball, some sort of league or knitting club or whatever. We have these commonality, these affinity groups. Well, when it comes to our relationships with people, especially inside the church, I hope we're not seeing our churches as affinity groups or our little segment of it as an affinity group, because we're called to something bigger. Again, we're talking with Doug Hankins. He's the author of the new book, Still Single, Still Called, a guide for Christian singles and those who love them. If you'd like the information about getting the book, glad to send it to you on the text line at 877-933-2484 so you can get the book. Doug, we were talking before the break about we like these things that are common to us, and that there's a reason for that. And a lot of churches have built their commonalities around married couples and families, but we're called to something bigger than just those commonalities. What is the commonality we need to build upon?
Great question. As I read the Gospels and I look at the life of Jesus, his relationships break down to the lowest common denominator quite often of in the kingdom, not in the kingdom. You are a Christian, you are not a Christian. That's the lowest common denominator. For a lot of churches and for for a lot of reasons that we've discussed, I think churches and legacy institutions have built around married single. It's one of the first things you check when you fill out a contact card at church. It's name, email address, mobile, married, single. And I just don't see that that's the way Jesus operated. It's certainly not the way Paul operated, because both married and single people were part of the early church. And I think the current trends are requiring and asking all of us to reconsider what our lowest common denominator is, our commonality. And it's probably not going to be married single. And that's going to be a challenge, primarily because, as you've mentioned, we've organized our Sunday school and small group space around singles groups or men's groups or women's groups or married groups. And I think those are great things to continue. I'm certainly not saying take those away, but we might need to add to that sort of, I don't think the term mixed is right, but a mixed assembly to say, what would it look like for some married couples and some single couples to get together and really unite around nothing more than we are all in Christ? And I think there are a lot of churches out there that are doing this with great success, and in part because 50% of the mission field is single.
You go back to Jesus and you look at his 12 apostles. What a mixed group that was.
Yep.
And yet Jesus embraced them all and commissioned them all to great things. And we can do that too. Now, in your book, I love the fact that you share some churches that you feel get this, who are really leading the forefront in how to bring more community, bring that commonality around Christ. So it's not just, we have our singles over here, we have our marrieds over here, and never the two shall twain. They are looking at ways to really incorporate people into the whole body. Choose one of the stories, because there's several of them, and it's like, I had a hard time choosing. So I'll let you choose.
Yeah, the one that rises to the top, a little unconventional choice, is a church in Montreal, Quebec, in Canada, called La Chapelle. And the pastor there is David Potier. It's a Southern Baptist Convention, which is the tradition I'm a part of. It's a church plant there that over the last decade has exploded to being one of the fastest growing churches in North America, all of North America. And they're doing so in one of the darkest mission fields in North America. Montreal is not at all open to things like religion or the gospel or Christianity in particular, especially not evangelical Christianity. And yet La Chapelle is thriving. And until recently, they haven't been able to own property. Protestants, or I should say non-Catholic groups, are not allowed to own property in Montreal. Wow. And so they've been doing this portable, and they have multiple locations, and they've expanded to multiple cities. And when my family went to visit them and help set up and tear down at their church plant and their main campus, we were just kind of trying to ask, what's the secret sauce here? What's making this work? And a lot of what is making them work is this reality, this commonality we've been talking about. They don't get to distinguish between, we're going to be the church that's for married people. It's not like there are a lot of evangelical churches in Montreal. So they just have to accept everybody, and they've got to take steps and build community with everybody. And they place such an emphasis, not only on the worship gathering, but on their smaller groups and on making room for everybody who God brings to them. And so you're going to see married people and single people, divorced people, widows, young people, old people. They're all going to be in their cool Montreal black hoodies and their, beautiful scarves, and they're going to be drinking their high-end coffee. And it's really a beautiful aesthetic that gathers there. And that's in part because of the art culture of Montreal. But they've really embraced that population, and they've really become a church for everybody. And I think the churches I talk about in the book that seem to reach singles just so happen to be the churches that reach everybody. And it's not that they're making any kind of concerted effort to reach singles. It's that they're trying to reach everybody, and they're trying to make room for everybody. And I think that's sort of the principle I'm gleaning from our current time period, which is how people and how churches treat single people is often a cue or a signal for how they treat everybody. And if you can be a church that incorporates singles into your fellowship, you're going to find that you are also the church that incorporates everybody into your fellowship. And so that's why I think it's so important to talk about singles right now and to really prioritize singles, is they'll be a beautiful gateway into everybody else.
Now, again, this book, Singles Are Still Singles, still called by Doug Hankins, a guide for Christian singles and those who love them. That's an example of a church, and you could do several others. And you bottom lined it, that they have a vision for everyone in a way. And I know that goes kind of counter to, we've always been talking in marketing. You have your target audience. Well,
right.
You do have a target audience in this, don't you?
I do. Yeah. I mean, books have to have target audiences.
No, I was talking about the mission of reaching people. I mean, many churches built on the marketing idea and thinking, okay, we need to target the young singles, which is that kind of became the default, as you said.
Right.
But again, help people clearly understand, because you kind of there is a target. There is a target.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's people who are interested in exploring and discovering Jesus, but it's people. So what you're not trying to do is get married people and sort of hopefully convert them to Christianity. But if you don't, and they're just married, that's fine. You're really just trying to target people who are open to exploring and discovering Jesus. So I'm not assuming that you're coming from another church. I mean, I would say that to be true. I'm not assuming you're coming from another church. I'm not assuming that you know much about Christianity. I'm going to assume that you're just interested in either exploring, coming to know him for the first time, or discovering him. You follow Jesus, but you really want to grow. And so it's really about the Great Commission here. This book, although it's about singleness, is really about community building around the gospel. We're trying to reach everybody,
Right.
but everybody who's interested in Jesus. Jesus has to be the main thing. And especially in a place like Central Florida, Orlando, Winter Park, where I live, um, it's nobody is from Winter Park, nobody's from Orlando, everybody is moving here. And so
Yeah.
there's no commonality in our churches except for Jesus. You're talking multiple languages. If you don't know this, Central Florida adds a new person to the population every 6 minutes.
Wow.
And they're coming from Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, the Caribbean, all over the US, all over the world, Russia. I mean, just, everywhere. And so, especially in our churches, we can't assume a lot of commonality in terms of culture. We just have to talk about Jesus and let Jesus draw everybody to himself.
Mm. I wish we could talk a little longer, but we're running out of time. But Doug, thanks for joining us. If you'd like the link to the book, Still Single, Still Called, just hit me up on the text line, 877-933-2484. Hey, Doug, thanks again for joining us here on The Reconnect.
Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, appreciate you too. Well, again, this is The Reconnect. I'm Paul filling in for Carmen. Any big vacation plans this summer? Maybe a trip to the Grand Canyon or a trip to the Smithsonian. Where are you going to go? You, your family, maybe you're going with a group of friends. Is God going with you? Pastor Steve DeWitt, the host of The Journey, which you can hear weekends here on Faith Radio, joins us next. You're listening to The Reconnect. Well, again, thanks for listening to the Thursday The Reconnect without Carmen. I'm Paul filling in for her. She'll be back in on Monday. Got any reading plans? Summer reading list? Maybe some C.S. Lewis. Okay, it was about a year ago that I read the Screwtape letters for the first time. Finally got to that. And I love one of the letters. Well, I like a lot of them. They're interesting the way C.S. Lewis paints it. But in one of the letters, C.S. Lewis reveals how hell deeply, deeply resents authentic beauty. Why? Because as the senior demon, Screwtape, complained, the enemy, who is God, well, the enemy's, he's the creator. And true beauty always points back to him. Demons can't create anything and cannot genuinely enjoy anything because God made it for a reason. And that's to point back to him. So what do? They distort, they distract, ruining our appreciation for beauty. Are you being distracted? And if you are, what are you really missing out on? To help us answer that as we think of summertime and maybe doing things that are more pleasurable, getting away on vacations, is Steve DeWitt, who is the pastor of Bethel Church. What city is that in again, Steve?
It's just outside Chicago.
Okay. And you're also the host of The Journey, which we have weekends here on Faith Radio. And you're the author of a book called Enjoying God in Everything, a guide to maximizing life's pleasures. Steve, first off, what big plans do you have for summer? Any travel plans, seeing anything exciting?
Yeah, my family and I were going to do a missions trip together. My daughters are on the younger side, so this is our first out of the country kind of experience. We had to get their passports, and we've been watching Rick Steves videos to learn about places we're going, and we're excited to introduce them to the world and to global missions.
Cool. And the place you're going, anything in particular? If you don't want to say where you're going, that's fine. But is there anything in particular you're looking forward to seeing?
I'm looking forward to seeing the look on my girls' faces when, for the first time in their life, nobody's, speaking English around them. They feel like, fish out of water, and hopefully to see them come to appreciate other cultures and people. And so I'm going to have my eyes more on my daughters than on maybe the things around us.
Well, that's okay. That's a beautiful thing, too. Okay, let's get to your book, Enjoying God in Everything, a guide to maximizing life's pleasures. Let's start off with just you answering, okay, pleasures, was that God's idea?
Well, yes, of course. And maybe I could just biographically share a little bit how I came to write on this subject. So maybe like your listeners, I found myself obviously enjoying the aesthetical experiences in this beautiful world that we live in, big and small, mountains, sunsets, morning coffee, and everything in between. And I grew up in a faith tradition that looked at pleasure maybe with a stink eye a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know what to do with these deeply emotive, evocative experiences, nor my desire to have them and have more of them. And so I just began to explore what is this? Why do I feel this way? Why do all human beings, feel this way? Theologically, biblically, what category does this go in? And I really discovered that, especially amongst broadly evangelical churches, a theology of beauty and the beauty of God is largely missing. We love to talk about the love of God, the mercy of God, the grace of God, lots of songs and sermons about all those things. But when it comes to understanding the beauty of God, I found that to be much lacking and decided to write a book or two to fill that space.
Mm. And again, pleasure is God's idea, because go to Genesis. God was having pleasure when he was creating, wasn't he?
Yes, and I would even say go before Genesis. If you think about the inner Trinitarian relationship between the Father, Son, and Spirit, it is deeply love, joy. They enjoy one another, and I think the joy they have in one another, when they made us in His image, they decided, why don't we share that gladness with these creatures we're making, and give them a capacity to relish the aesthetical experiences in the beautiful universe that we're going to place them, and the beautiful earth that we're going to place them. And then he doubled down and said, not only are we going to give them a capacity for that, how about if we align their five senses with the created order we're making? Let's make beautiful things and let them hear. Let's make beautiful things to see and let them see. Let's make things touch great, feel great, and they can sense that too. How about taste? Aren't we all thankful for how pleasurable food and and drink can be?
Chocolate.
All of that, I think, part of how God made us, and is largely assumed by us, and we don't realize that it's part of the good gift that God gave to us, both in the beauty of creation, but also in our capacity to receive that beauty into our experience and to relish it.
Mm. And not only that, it's a way of him communicating about himself to us, isn't it?
Yes, Romans 1, that his divine attributes are clearly seen in the things that are made. So, and this is always a little bit tricky for us theologically, because if you put it too high, now you're making the created order divine, and that's pantheism. Certainly, world religions that hold to that. But I think our danger is too often putting it too low, and not realizing that God is communicating through, theologians call it general revelation, natural theology, and that he intended to tell us what he is like by the symmetry and the aesthetical beauty of the world around us. And so if I just vamp on this a moment, the challenge is that after the fall, because of sin, human beings experience these things for their own sake. This is why people pay insane amounts of money to go to a concert of a favorite artist, or they, spend insane amounts of money to buy a house on a lake or by an ocean, because they inherently love those experiences. But sin has broken our ability to see and experience the glory of God in those experiences. And so I would maintain that through the gospel and through Jesus, who is the ultimate beauty ever on earth, and the cross is the ultimate expression of beauty, as God self-sacrifices for us, which is the essence of love, that a Christian, 2 Corinthians 4, comes to see the glory of God in the face of Jesus. We come to behold true, ultimate beauty. And as a result of that, now we can see and experience all the other beauties of the world for his sake. So the core message of the book is beauty leads to wonder, wonder leads to worship. It should. Sin breaks that, the gospel restores it, and therefore Christians should be deeply theological, aesthetical lovers of beauty and turn all those experiences into thanksgiving and praise to God, which is what worship is.
Again, we're talking with Steve DeWitt. He's the speaker you'll hear weekends here on Faith Radio on the program called The Journey. Plus, he's the author of Enjoying God and Everything. When we come back from the break, we want to continue looking at this. I mean, yes, things are enjoyable. As I said before, chocolate, love chocolate. But am I enjoying it for its own sake? Or is it drawing me closer to something else, into unity with something else, not just the chocolate? We'll continue this conversation in just a few moments here on Faith Radio.
Hey, I really like it that you listen whenever you want, wherever you are, at all times of the day and night. That is so cool. So thank you so very much for all the ways in which you support this ministry with your prayers and words of encouragement. Right now, in order for this podcast to be available everywhere all the time for everyone, I actually need your help. Could you support this podcast right now so that more people in more places at every hour of every day could hear about Jesus and grow in their relationship with him? Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. And thank you so much again for listening to this podcast.
Yes, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into the world, their words to the ends of the world. In heaven, in the heavens, God has pitched his tent. Hey, thanks again for listening to The Reconnect. I'm Paul, filling in for Carmen. We're talking with Steve DeWitt. He's from The Journey, which you hear weekends here on Faith Radio. He's also the author of Enjoying God and Everything. And Steve, I'm going to go a little C.S. Lewis-y again, if you will indulge me. But
Sure.
he talked about mere cravings versus unity. In it, Lewis was kind of arguing that, we don't want to merely see beauty. Yes, we see it, but then we're just so drawn into it. We want to somehow be united with the beauty. And that's something that the demons exploit, so to speak, that using this longing to encourage us to idolize the thing instead of what the thing points us to and drawing us into the presence of God. So how do we get the blinders off?
Well, I love the C.S. Lewis reference because he was influential in my exploration on this. Another quote from him: "The sweetest thing in all my life has been the longing to find the place where all the beauty came from." And so he was very attuned to the beautiful world, but as a historian and a kind of a philosopher guy, he looked beyond the physical realm and saw that beyond it is a spiritual realm and a spiritual beauty that is really where an image bearer longs to go and longs to be. So, it's somewhat of two silly illustrations of our desire for this. If you ever go to an art museum, they always have ropes in front of the masterpieces. And the reason they do is they got to keep people away. They can't get too close. Everyone wants to get super close. Or take a child. Kids are famous for not only looking at things, but licking them.
Yep.
Why do kids want to lick them? They want more than simply to observe it. They want to experience it. And they represent all of us. In a sense, we're all walking around licking every day, wanting to go to the next level with the beautiful world. So a few tips How about a few tips for people? One of the things that I think is most helpful is to think backwards. Okay, you have to go, you know, here I am talking to, I think, largely Minnesota, Iowa. I grew up in Waterloo, Cedar Falls. My
Oh,
dad was a 40-year John Deere engineer. So I'm talking to my people here. This is my
yep.
my hometown folk. And there in Iowa, we have the Mississippi River, and it's big and beautiful, but its source is up there in Minnesota, if
Lake
I have that
Itasca.
right, don't
Yep.
I, Paul?
Lake
Yeah,
Itasca. Yep.
yeah. So in a way, it's a picture, I think, of all of us are in Council Bluffs, and we're seeing and experiencing the river downstream. And what I'm talking about is to consciously go upstream. You got to get to Minnesota.
hmm
And in creation, God is Minnesota, and the created world is Council Bluffs. And to think about how this beauty relates to what I know to be true about God. So um, if you're eating chocolate, to your reference prior, you can give thanks to God as the giver of all good gifts, who made the cocoa bean. What a blessing. Um, and to be thankful to God for the gift and the experience of it. You also can honor God. Maybe it's a mountain range and you're like, wow, the grandeur of the Sierra mountain range. It reminds me a little bit of, man, God's even bigger. God's even better. God's even more beautiful. And I think that's the sense of beauty, is whatever beauty you're experiencing, to realize that God is better than what he has made. He's more beautiful. He's more sweet. He's more delightful. And when we go backwards, when we go upstream, that's when worship happens. Okay. And just a brief little thanksgiving to God, or a contemplation about how kind God is to put you on that vacation wherever you are, or just viewing a beautiful Minnesota sunset over the corn or whatever. It's just like, these are precious gifts. People in hell don't get those experiences, but people in Minnesota do. And to be thankful. And I think that's how we live theologically in a world that God made to reflect what he is like.
Well, again, we're talking with Steve DeWitt. And Steve, I got to tell you about this, because here's where creation really spoke to me one time. It was 7 years ago. Remarrying, I married my wife, Jessica, 7 years ago. We went to the North Shore of Lake Superior. If you've never been there, you got to go. Anyway, there was a scenic overlook. And if you know the history of the area, the whole area is really a scar, because you had the glacial, scraping of things. You had volcanic stuff that, disrupted the area. So everything was, you could say destroyed. And yet the growth, the new life just hit me I was floored. I mean, it just hit by the beauty of this. What was once ruined was reborn. And it just kind of, being this was a remarriage for me, it was like the redemptive nature of God. And seeing that in creation as well, just, I still, thinking about it, it's like I'm fighting back a tear, because it was just so amazing. And it only pointed me to his grace. I guess as we're getting ready to wind down here, I want you to give some encouragement as people are heading out. Maybe they're going to the Grand Canyon. Maybe they're heading to, this, big year with it being the 250th birthday of our country. Then maybe they're going to go to some historical sites like the Smithsonian, or they're going to go to the Black Hills or such. Encourage them. Keep their eyes open for God.
Well, my encouragement, 1 Corinthians 10, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And so it's probably easier to begin on the grand scale, but if you can do it with your morning coffee, do it with the family, that the relationships you enjoy, see those as good gifts from a good God. give praise to him, give thanks to him. And then as you experience the bigger and the broader and the better, the North Shore of Lake Superior or whatever it might be, now you have the basic toolkit to, on a bigger scale, think about Lake Superior, the fact that it was there long before Paul was in existence, and it'll be there long after you're dead. And God is eternal, and we are here fleeting. Just bring to mind what is true about God, and then give him praise for it. And when you do, that's how you're taking the beauty and the wonder and turning it into worship, which is our ultimate purpose and end.
Okay, one more question, Steve, because you've traveled around and such. And what is one place, just think of one, that you would recommend for people to just go to be awestruck by God's amazing creativity and grace? One place you've been. I'm sure you've been to plenty, but what's one that jumps to the top of your mind?
Well, you didn't tip me off. I was going to have to answer this one.
That's the point. I wanted to get you.
Okay, I'm not going to answer it the way you're asking.
All right.
Quickly, I'll say there's so many big, beautiful, amazing places that people may or may not be able to get to. But I find the daily blessing, the look on the face of my daughters. Today's the last day of school. I just said goodbye to them. Their joy and their enthusiasm, their excitement. I got married later in life, didn't know if I'd ever have kids. And, it's such a blessing to me to experience that with them. And they are such a gift from God to me. So I'll go back to my daughters and my experience of those relationships and love as most special.
That's not a cop-out, dude. That's true stuff there, too. Hey, Steve, thanks again. For people who are interested in the journey, tell us about the show real quickly. I mean, you have about 30 seconds.
Sure. It's a radio program. I am a Bible teacher, pastor, preacher. These are sermons that are expositional from the Bible. We're a national program. We're on the weekends at Faith Radio. And I'm a local guy. So if
an Iowan,
if
yes.
Local guy means something to you, tune in and you'll probably hear some Iowa Hawkeye, local Iowa, Minnesota type illustrations, and maybe you'll enjoy that.
Okay. Well, just so you know, I lived 2 years in Iowa, in Des Moines, back in the early 2000s. And growing up a Minnesotan, I had a lot of Iowa jokes, which I repent of mostly. There's a few that stick, and you guys know it, and so you're good with them too, as far as I know. So
it's all in good fun.
Thanks again, Steve, for joining us here on the Reconnect.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Well, again, as we started out the show, let's go back to our Growing Your Faith verse for today. If you're going into a situation you feel is going to be hard, remember through Christ, who is the one who's going to give you strength. Philippians 4:13, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the abiding fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you as you head out into the world, work his will, and be his ambassador today. Thanks again for listening to The Reconnect. I'll be back tomorrow. Remember, Carmen back on Monday here on Faith Radio.
Thanks for listening to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. Let us know how we can help you more fully reconnect the eternal with the everyday. We want to walk with you throughout your journey of discipleship, so let's connect. You can text us at 877-933-2484 or connect with us online at myfaithradio.com and on all our social media. I look forward to connecting with you as we each seek to reconnect the eternal with the everyday.